This is the Easy Betting Show. My name is Easy, and I got a whole lot of new shit. Let me know what y'all think about it. Goods, bads, but personally, I think it's awesome. A whole lot better than what I had beforehand. Yeah, I'm excited. Today, I am talking about Thursday Night Football for Week 2. Should be a really good game. Coming off of a pretty good week. I know last week I said I was going to track my units in these. I will be doing that for the Sunday episode. That will be in a couple of days. So don't worry about that. But yeah, I'm just going to be talking about the Thursday Night Football game in this one. So it should be a fairly quick episode. I'm not going to have a line for this game because, as I've already said before, I'm not a big lines person. I'm more player props, but especially in prime time, I typically do not bet lines in prime time just because I don't like to. So because I'm not betting it myself, I'm not going to give it out because to me that just doesn't make sense. I am still going to talk about it and I'm going to tell you who I'm leaning, but it's not going to be an official bet. The official bets are going to be player props. I also have some anytime touchdown bets and then my first touchdown bets for primetime games like I'll do throughout the entirety of the season. We haven't been great on first touchdown bets so far this year because it's mainly just been a bunch of chalk. So hopefully that changes in this one, but we'll see. The game is the Bills at the Dolphins. The Dolphins are a 2.5 point favorite. They're minus 142 on the money line. The Bills are plus 120 on the money line, and the over-under is 48.5. And yeah, like I said, I think this is going to be a really good game. I mean, they kind of played similar-ish games last week. Both offenses kind of started slow, but then they got better as the game progressed. Neither defense looked great, but they weren't really bad either. It was kind of just like middle ground for the defenses. The Bills gave up 28 points. One of them was a 98-yard kick return for a touchdown, so you kind of can't give that to the defense. But special teams issue potentially for the Bills, or it could have just been because it was the first game of the season. I'm sure they'll have that cleaned up. But the defense gave up 124 rushing yards, and they let Kyler throw for an average of 5.2 yards per completion, even though he only had 162 yards total. So kind of look at that how you want. Obviously, 162 total yards isn't great, but 5.2 yards per completion isn't horrible. So it's kind of middle ground, kind of like the defenses were. They did get 4 sacks and a turnover in this game. So they definitely did get to the quarterback. Now, obviously, this is going to be a little bit different because the Bills week 1 went up against the Cardinals. So they had Kyler Murray to deal with and he could just run out of pressure. Tua obviously can't really do that. So the Bills could get even more pressure than could get more sacks than they did last week because they don't have the Kyler effect just running all over the place. The Dolphins only gave up 17 points, but they also let the Jaguars go for 128 rushing yards, pretty much the same. And they let Trevor Lawrence throw for an average of 7.7 yards a pass. Again, it wasn't a lot of total yards, but over 7 yards a pass average, isn't great. I mean, obviously it's the NFL, so the numbers are going to be a little bit higher, but probably not the number that they were hoping to see. They did also get 3 sacks and a turnover. So both of these defensive lines did get pressure. Now, the difference here is the Dolphins were going against Trevor Lawrence, who is a little bit of a runner, but he's definitely not a Kyler type of runner. So there wasn't that run out of it to the degree that the Bills had to go up against. So I would say in week 1, the Bills defensive line did look better, but probably not by very much. On the offensive side of the ball, they both kind of look like they have in years past. The Bills ran the ball for 130 yards. The big two of them being James Cook for 71 yards and then Josh Allen for 39 and 2 touchdowns. He did have over 40, but then he nailed it at the end of the game. So typical Josh Allen stuff, stealing red zone touchdowns. Josh Allen also threw for 232 yards and 10.2 average yards per completion, which is, way better than both of the defenses gave up. So that kind of lets you factor that in a little bit. He also had 2 more touchdowns throwing the ball, one to Khalil Shakir. I don't know why that was so hard for me to say, and one to Matt Collins. His favorite target, though, was Keon Coleman. He had 4 receptions on 5 targets for 51 yards. He didn't score, though. But Josh Allen had completions to 10 different guys. So Keon Coleman was his favorite target, but only by 1 target. So as of right now, it kind of seems like Josh Allen's just throwing it to anybody since Stephon Diggs isn't there anymore. But that being said, in his post-game interview, he seemed to hype up Keon a lot. So my guess is he's probably going to try to get him the ball a little bit more, maybe not to Stephon Diggs level because obviously they don't have that chemistry yet, but I think he is going to be the wide receiver 1 for this team down the road. On the Dolphins side of the ball, the offense, like I said, didn't look good early. Their first 4 drives, they turned it over, punted, and then turned it over before finally scoring right before the half or on their last drive of the half. The rushing game didn't do much, maybe as expected, although Achane and Mostert are pretty good running backs, but they did both get banged up, so that I'm sure factored into the rushing game. But it was the passing game as usual for the Dolphins. Tua threw for 338 yards. 130 and his only touchdown went to Tyreek Hill, who had an 80-yard touchdown, which cashed the longest reception last week, if you watched that episode. Jalen Waddle close behind him with 109, and Achane was actually pretty big in the passing game as well with 76 yards. So, of course, and part of it was to do with the fact that they were down early, so they probably felt like they had to pass more, but I think that's just the identity of this offense is just pass heavy. I mean, you have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. You're going to want to get it to them as much as possible. So, now with this game on Thursday, to start, neither Mostert or Achane went through walkthroughs today. Now, personally, I do think they're going to play. Tuesday practices are just walkthroughs. So if you're banged up, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to practice for this one because it's not a real quote unquote practice. But they will probably be banged up even if they do play. So that could definitely factor into a Miami rushing game that isn't big to begin with, or at least didn't look like it week 1. Another factor is they're playing in Miami. Obviously, the Bills are from Buffalo, so the weather affects them pretty much every time they come down south to Miami. Now, this is a night game, so it's not going to be as massive as if it would be in like a 1 o'clock game, which I think sucks for the Dolphins because they're going to have to go up to Buffalo when it's cold. So they're kind of getting shafted in the weather for the series, but it's still going to be hot. It's still Miami. So that will definitely affect Buffalo, especially in the second half. If you remember this game from last year, in the second half, like the entire Bills team had cramps. It was brutal. And a lot of the Dolphins players were actually cramping up too. So I don't know, but the weather's definitely going to impact it, even though it is a night game. So maybe not as much. But yeah, I mean, I think this game is going to be probably what people should expect. Josh Allen's probably going to run the ball because he always runs the ball, especially in the red zone. I think he's going to try to feed Keon Coleman a little bit more after his comments post-game on Sunday. Like I said, he only had 5 targets, which did lead the team, but I think he probably gets to 6, maybe 7 or more in this game, especially against the Dolphins defense that isn't incredible. On the Dolphins side of the ball, it's probably going to be a repeat of last week. They're probably not going to run it a ton with their running back core kind of banged up. The Buffalo defensive line being decent and having Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, obviously, they're probably going to try to throw the ball a lot. They're probably going to try to throw it deep a fair bit as well. And I don't think that Bills defense are going to be able to compete with these guys down the field. So I think it's probably going to be a close game in the first half because it's always a close game when these two teams play. So it'll probably be close at halftime. The Bills could even be leading potentially at halftime, but I think the second half is going to be a different story. I think this is where we see the Dolphins kind of open it up a little bit, and I have them winning by a touchdown. So like I said, I don't bet lines in primetime games, so I'm not actually going to bet this, But I will say I like Dolphins -2.5, but I'm not personally betting it just because I don't know. Primetime games are weird when it comes to the line. I don't know if it's just like the extra time the teams have to wait or what, but yeah, I just stay away from them. Plus, I just like player props more. But onto those player props. I have 4 of them for this game. The first one is one that I bet last week, and I will probably be betting a lot. Tyreek Hill, longest reception over 30.5 yards. It's -110 at 1.1 unit. If you watched my Sunday show for last week, I was on this last week as well, but it was only 29.5 yards. They did bump it a yard, but he had an 80-yard touchdown, and they bumped it 1 yard. I mean, I know he's not going to have an 80-yard touchdown every week, but he's going to have plenty of chances in this game to get over 31 yards. They'll throw him multiple deep passes, and even if he doesn't connect on one of the deep passes they're going to throw to him, he can easily get 31 yards on a bubble screen. He's Tyreek Hill. So this is pretty much just a system play for me. Like I said, I'm going to play it a lot. You'll hear this one a lot, but yeah, one of my favorite plays. The next one that I have is Jalen Waddle over 63.5 receiving yards. This one is -114. I'm putting 1.2 units on that one. And I like this play for 3 reasons. One, obviously what he did last week. He went over 100 yards last week, and the line's only 64. That seems crazy to me. 2, the defense is probably going to try to clamp down on Tyreek Hill, potentially giving Waddle more options. Obviously, every defense in this league is going to want to try to stop Tyreek Hill, which is why Jalen Waddle's probably produced at the level he has, being with the Dolphins. Now, he's obviously a great receiver in his own right, but Tyreek Hill definitely helps him out a little bit. And then the third reason is the defensive scheme that the Bills run. They mostly run nickel. And if you don't know what nickel is, that basically means they take out a linebacker and they bring in an extra DB. So they don't have as many linebackers. It's basically to try to prevent the pass, which makes you think, okay, you like a receiving yards play because they're adding a corner. That doesn't make any sense. Well, let me finish. Typically when they run nickel, they run a 2 deep coverage or a dime package. So they have 2 safeties deep. And with Hill on the other side of the ball, they're most likely going to shade the 2 corners over to Tyreek Hill's side to prevent him from getting those bomb passes that I was talking about. On top of that, the nickel that you could potentially be worried with is probably going to have to guard Achane, or whatever running back they have back there. I mean, Achane went for 80 yards in the game last week. So one of the 5 corners is going, or one of the 3 corners, because the safety's obviously not going to be on him, is going to have to be on the running back. That leaves Jalen Waddle on a semi-island with most likely Christian Benford guarding him. Now, if you don't think Christian Benford or Jalen Waddle can get past Benford for 5-6 receptions minimum, I think this is a great game for him. And even if they go into zone, which they do play zone fairly often as well, Waddle and Hill are 2 of the best receivers at exploiting holes in zone defense. So I really like both of them a lot. I took Hill's longest reception because his line's like 100+ yards, and I just don't want to bet that high, but he can get 30.5 yards on the first play of the game. Waddle, you can lean receptions if you don't like his yards, but it's juiced. It's like -152 or something like that for 5. So I took his yards over his receptions just because the odds were better, and I think he probably hits both. The third one I have is a guy I've already talked about like 3 times. Keon Coleman over 3.5 receptions. It's -120, so I got that for 1.2 units. He had 4 on 5 targets last week, and I think he's going to get more targets this week. To me, it just kind of seems like common sense. The Josh Allen comments, they've gotten a little bit more chemistry now that they've played in a real game together. He was aggressive all last game. He was fighting with some dudes and hyped up, and I think he's just the guy for this Bills offense. I think they're going to love him in Buffalo. And I think it starts on Thursday. I think he has a good game on Thursday. And 3.5 reception is just, to me, it's a little bit of an insult to him because I think he's going to do way better than that. And then the last one is a kicker prop. which I love betting kicker props in primetime games. This will definitely not be the last one you see of these because in primetime games, kicker props, for whatever reason, they just seem to kick more field goals. I don't know why, but it's awesome, and I love betting it. Jason Sanders over 1.5 made field goals is even money, so I'm going to put 1 unit on that. He had 2 last week, so he would have cashed this last week, and this is a primetime game. And on top of this, both running backs for the Dolphins are banged up right now, which means if they get down in the red zone or close to the red zone, there's a chance that they're not able to run the ball like they typically would be able to. Well, any secondary that plays football knows you have a better chance of stopping receivers when you get into the red zone because there's just not as much area to cover. So I think this is a very good opportunity for Jason Sanders to get 2 field goals, potentially by halftime, and this be an easy cash. Next is touchdown plays. I have 4 anytime touchdowns. I got 2 for each team. Yeah, Wobbly, I did look at Tua passing yards because of everything that I've said. And that is a good bet. You know, to get over 2-to-1 odds on that is really good. I might take that as well. So yeah, definitely something that if y'all agree with me and you think the Dolphins are going to be slinging it, which I think they do, yeah, 2 at 300 plus at over 2-to-1 is a good bet. All right, to the touchdown plays. Like I said, I got 4 of them. The first one that I'm going to do again is a repeat from last week, and that's Tyreek Hill minus 130, 1.3 units on that one. Obviously, you got the deep stuff. You got the plays that go for 80 yards. But even if they get down in the red zone, to my point kind of with the kicker prop, if their running backs are banged up and they can't use their running backs like they typically would, there's a very good chance they put Tyreek Hill in one of those swing plays like Jalen Reed scored on, like Amon-Ra did on Sunday night, like a couple other guys have scored touchdowns on, and they just do that with him inside the 5 or the 10 or whatever, and he scores that way. I think there's going to be numerous chances for Tyreek Hill to score in this game in a bunch of different ways. The second one that I have, Jalen Waddle plus 185, throwing a unit on that. I mean, like I've said, you know, the same reason I like his receiving yards, I like his touchdowns. I think there's a great chance he scores in this one, and he scores all the time too. So it just plus 185 for Waddle to score is kind of nuts to me too. It's really good odds. The third one is Josh Allen minus 110, 1.1 unit. And this is just a system play. I mean, he had 2 last week. You know, he's going to run the ball, especially in the red zone. He loves stealing touchdowns from his running backs. He's kind of Jalen Hurts-esque with that. So to me, it's just common sense. You got to play it. And if he fucks you, he fucks you. And then the last guy is another one I've already talked about. Keon Coleman plus 250. I'm going to put half a unit on that one because you're getting such good odds for it. And everything I've already said about Keon, he's probably going to get more targets. Josh Allen seems to love him. But also, he had the most red zone targets on the team last game. Now, it was only 2, to be fair. So I don't know how much you can really factor that in there. But he did have the most red zone targets. So even though it was only 2, still, you know, whatever. So I think he's got a really good chance of scoring in this one. And to be fair, anyone on the Bills could score the touchdown. So, you know, why not make it the guy that you have the most faith in Keon? Last thing that I'm going to talk about in this show is the first touchdown plays, my favorite part of primetime games. We haven't hit one yet because it's been chalk the entire time, which is frustrating, but you always got a chance to turn it around. Why not turn it around on Thursday? I got 4. If you don't know how I do this, 2 from each team. I put a quarter unit on all 4, which is why I don't go chalk. So if you disagree with me about doing it this way and you want to go chalk, cool, go chalk. But this is how I like to do it because it's a lot more fun. The 4 that I have in this one is Jalen Waddle at plus 1,200. I'm not even going to say why because I've already talked about it for like 10 minutes. Love Jalen Waddle. Plus 1,200 is great odds for him. The next one I have, Keon Coleman, plus 1,600. Everything I just said about his anytime is the reason why I like him for the first touchdown. There's a very good chance it's Josh Allen. I realize this. I'm not stupid. But Josh Allen's like plus 500. So, like, this is just a lot more fun, and you have way better odds. And when you have Josh Allen anytime, it kind of saves you if he is the first one to score. So, Keon Coleman plus 1,600. The third one that I have is Mac Hollins plus 2,900. He did have a touchdown in the game last week. Josh Allen kind of seemed to look at him as the second target in the red zone. And, you know, he's got good hands, which is what you're looking for in the red zone when you're trying to score. So Mack Hollins plus 2,900. And the last one is really just an odds play that I think could be really fun. So yeah, if you don't like this one, just throw somebody else in there. But I think there's actually a chance. Alec Ingold plus 6,500. He had 2 rushes and a target in last week's game. So he did get some looks, even though it wasn't very many. But like we know, both running backs are banged up. So if they aren't 100%, and especially if they don't play, but I think they do, he could get a chance at the goal line. You know, Tua is probably not going to run it in there. And if they clamp down on Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle on, say, second or third down, and they're at the 1, Alec Ingold. So odds play, Alec Ingold plus 6,500. And that is it for this one. I appreciate those of you that hung out with me and checked out the show. And make sure you like and subscribe for me because it helps me out a lot. Make sure you tell anyone else that hasn't checked me out yet to check me out yet because, again, it helps me out. I'm trying to get this rolling. And yeah, that does it for me today. I will be live tomorrow going over some college football picks, so make sure you check that one out as well. And yeah, I'll see you all on the next one.